Don says in question 2, was the banishing ritual that we perform of any effect in purifying the place of working and screening from influences that we do not wish, meaning negative stuff? Ra says this is quite correct, so the ritual was effective. Don says, can you tell me what I can do to improve the effectiveness of the ritual? Ra says no. Don says, can you tell me what caused the instrument to become in a condition toward unconsciousness during the last 2 meditations prior to this one to such an extent that we discontinue them? Classic Ra. We can certainly say that or comment on it. And Don says, would you please tell me that? And here we go. Ra says, the entity which greets this instrument from the Orion group first attempted to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was preparing for the raw contact. You are familiar with this tactic and its consequences. The instrument, with no pause upon feeling this greeting, called for the grounding within the physical complex by requesting that the hand be held. So, even though I said I won't do a summary, I'll do it here just because there is some information that is relevant from previous sessions. But it seems that, let's just recapitulate what's happening here. So they did the banishing ritual, everything was fine. I can probably speculate a little bit and get into Don's mind by retracing what has happened. In the past 2 attempts for sessions, it seems like they had issues with trying to get into the trance state. And they noticed that, very perceptive to a degree, or maybe not, because in the next paragraph, or the next questions, I don't know. We'll get to that. But what happened was that they couldn't get into the trance state and they couldn't initiate the raw contact. So Don seems to be worried about that. And asks, first, is the ritual, the banishing ritual, performed correctly, and is there no negative entity here? And Ra confirms and says, yes, it was effective. Then Don says, can you tell me how to improve the ritual? Ra says, no, we cannot. That's the law of Confucian, of course. We cannot infringe on your free will by telling you what to do. Then they go into the problem. It seems like a couple of sessions or attempts, they had issues getting into the trance state, and Carla became unconscious, which is different from trance, right? They said toward unconsciousness during the last 2 meditations prior to this one, to such an extent that we discontinue them. So they had to discontinue them because she was unconscious. And so Ra explains that what happened in those 2 attempts was the following. The entity, that's the negative entity, which greets the instrument from the Orion group, first attempted to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirits, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was preparing for the raw contact. It's interesting that they say, see, the wording here is to me interesting, because they say they cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit. So why would we call it spirit as opposed to mind-body-spirit complex? This is interesting. See, let me give you a bit of my own view on all of this. Because you see, I have to explain a little bit my view of non-duality. There is no other self. There's only the one self. And so any iteration that we can give of this self that apparently looks separate is an illusion. So why am I saying this? Because we can easily attach ourselves to the idea that we are a mind-body-spirit complex. almost like saying, I am this body. We know that's not true. So if we are the self, the one self that exists, then you are not the mind-body-spirit complex, nor are you spirit. And you see, in the law of one, it fits perfectly because they call the spirit a shuttle. Well, what is a shuttle for? For the self, yes. So if you can connect these dots and see what Ra says as to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was getting. So that's the part that I'm interested in. They try to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which is this construct that is here, right? This window in which the creator sees itself, for the spirit to leave the physical complex. That means that once the spirit leaves, then the complex is available for negative time space. You see, this construct, this metaphysical construct that is the mind-body-spirit complex, can be retrieved then. And this is my speculation. Please, this may change in the future, but this is how I see it. Because once you retrieve the mind-body-spirit complex and the spirit leaves, then yeah, it's available for manipulation. Typical with the negative ones. So, what is the physical complex of yellow ray? Is this body? And it's not just the body, but the mind, the way in which the mind is configured here. So indeed, the mind-body-spirit complex will, of course, be displaced. You see, it is not a personality. It is not a you, a soul. Even the soul is like calling the river a river. The river is not a river. The river is water. You're calling the water river, but the river does not stand out of itself from water. You see, these are very key components if you want to get into the law of one, in the mystical aspect of it, and perhaps clear out these deluded ideas. You see, speaking of delusion, that you as a soul must be preserved. This is missing the point. And of course, it causes a further distortion in the mind to still believe that you are a sort of entity, that must survive. Even in the metaphysical world, you must survive. How many times have I heard this? I am shocked. Actually, I'm not shocked anymore, but I was shocked at the amount of metaphysical complexities that are taken out of this, extrapolated from the perception of the ego self, the spiritual ego. So yeah, whenever I take an opportunity or see an opportunity like this to clear out that there is only one being, and you can see it within the words here, or at least I can see it. Maybe, some other people say, no, this validates the fact that we're all separate, and that's fine. I don't care for that. I'm in love with unity because it's the only thing there is. So if you can't find it, then we're missing the point. Or, as religiously would say, we are sinning. We're missing the point. That's what sin is, by the way. Anyhow, Ra continues and says, you're familiar with this tactic and its consequences. Of course, we know that from the previous sessions, which I won't discuss. It's just what happened previously with Carla. The instrument, with no pause upon feeling this greeting, Carla, feeling this whole amalgamation of mind-body-spirit complex that they call the instrument, call for the grounding within the physical complex by requesting that the hand be held. So Carla, apparently, so Carla knew that something was going on, and she asked, hold my hand. By the way, this is something that Ra instructed them to do to maintain the instrument within the mind-body-spirit complex, or the spirit within the mind-body-spirit complex. Let's read more of what Ra says here. They say, thus the greatest aim of the Orion entity was not achieved. Of course, they wanted to displace the mind-body-spirit complex, which was beautiful. I mean, it's Carla's polarized vehicle. They keep saying, however, it discovered that those present were not capable of distinguishing between unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit intact and the trance state in which the mind-body-spirit complex is not present. So apparently, if the Orion entity couldn't achieve what it wanted, which again was to take away Carla, big props to Carla and the team, right? After knowing that twice they had an issue and they knew it was the Orion entity, they kept on going with the raw contact. It's just admirable. I mean, it's that valor that nobody talks about, that bravery. I mean, I appreciate it. Some people may think it's foolish. You are right. That is quite foolish. But we owe a lot to the foolish people in the past who attempted to do those things that were ridiculously dangerous. And lo and behold, we learned a lot from them. I actually stand out as one of them by taking the chance of facing the cold, as Wim Hof recommended, and I'm so grateful for that. He was the fool who was laughed at for doing all these ridiculously dangerous things, and now we owe him so much. Wim Hof, the man, the myth, the legend. All right, so this was not achieved, but they discovered that those present, I suppose, Don and Jim, who else, were not capable of distinguishing between unconsciousness and with the mind-body-spirit intact and the trance state in which the mind-body-spirit complex is not present. Another interesting wording here. It's important when they mention mind-body-spirit and then mind-body-spirit complex. Let me go back a little bit. Okay. So, there is a difference between mind-body-spirit and complex, or mind-body-spirit complex. Just don't want to keep repeating the same words, but complex is within third density because you have the veil, and the veil creates all the archetypes for the experience of third density. I don't think the archetypes are taken into the higher densities. I could be wrong. That's not my department, but it seems like the mind-body-spirit intact, as they say. Let's reread, because Ryan's talking about that Don and Jim weren't able to distinguish between unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit intact. So that would be, I suppose, unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit having no issues, and the trance state in which the mind-body-spirit complex is not present. So now they add the complex here. Sort of makes sense because the mind-body-spirit complex is our physical, I'm hesitating to say the word physical, with the third density present, right? Or the mind's perception of third density, right? So that is the mind-body-spirit complex present. When it's not present, it's like Carla. Because as you remember, Carla had no recollection of what happened. It was like she went to sleep, deep sleep, and came back. No recollection of dreams or anything, right? So that's a trance state with the mind-body-spirit complex not present. That's trance. That's how all the sessions in the raw material were channeled. Very uncommon. I don't think I've heard anybody doing this but Carla. And the other state was unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit intact. Right? Just unconscious, but the mind-body-spirit seems to be intact. I can't really connect why they didn't say complex here. But I know that it refers to the essence, the core, the mind not influenced by the veil of forgetting, which is really what makes it complex. So that is unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit intact. Not being away, I guess, just there. That's the key. So even though you're not there, because you're unconscious, meaning you're not active, your mind-body-spirit is intact, which is really the true essence. The mind-body-spirit complex is it's a different animal. It's a different thing. So All right, I'm picking too much on this. Let's move on. Ra finishes and says, therefore, it applied to the fullest extent the greeting which causes the dizziness, and in meditation without protection, caused in this instrument simple unconsciousness, as in what you would call fainting or vertigo. The Orion entity consequently used this tactic to stop the raw contact from having the opportunity to be accomplished. So, all right, just the typical behavior of a brat, of a spoiled child. That's what the negative entity did. It applied the fullest extent, to the fullest extent, the greeting which causes the dizziness or attack. They use greeting, I suppose, in the touching, metaphysically touching of the instrument. In meditation without protection, caused this instrument simple unconsciousness. So basically just made her unconscious, as in you would call fainting or vertigo, I guess, causing this. The Orion entity consequently used this tactic to stop the raw contact, so just preventing the raw contact from happening. If I can't get what I want, I'll just disturb you until you can't establish any contact. That's it. That's all he did. So yeah, this is clearly something that happens when you are doing this type of work. We're going to get into that though. We'll probably cover half of this session, maybe a little bit more. We'll see as time goes on.